Hello, welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. I'm Christine Eck. I am so happy to be here today with another beautiful friend and guest. Stephanie Piers is back on the Sacred Window podcast. Stephanie and I have been working on an upcoming event that bears a little bit of preparation and attention because it's a really special, unique opportunity that we are hosting. Real quick, I will introduce Stephanie. Stephanie is the founder of Empowered Mama. She is a divine feminine embodiment coach, a Kundalini instructor, an Ayurveda health coach, and postpartum caregiver. Stephanie is originally from Canada. She lives in Mexico, and she's a mom to 3. Stephanie is going to be leading a forgiveness workshop coming up with her Kundalini background. And we wanted to share a conversation today about what is Kundalini Yoga, how we can free ourselves from so much that's clinging on to us energetically through forgiveness of ourselves, how we do that. And I'm just really excited to have this conversation. I think that feelings of guilt, feelings of shame are pervasive, and there's something that every human has in some respect. And there's so much that we can't actually do anything about that's come into our experiences throughout life. And yet we often are giving ourselves a really, really hard time about things that are in the past. And how do we move through that and create the goodness that we know is possible, the goodness that we know is within us, even though these things have happened that we may not love about ourselves. And I think that this is a really important aspect to being the parents we want to be, to being the caregivers that we want to be, to having the relationships that we want to have. And so I'm always interested in the hows, the tools, and Kundalini Yoga offers us a really beautiful tool. And so tell me, to begin, what is Kundalini Yoga?
Yeah, so Kundalini Yoga is it's very different from Hatha Yoga in the sense that yes, we move with the breath, but it's a very prescriptive type of movement. So it's a set of movements coupled with sound or breath or a specific breathing pattern for a specific amount of time, targeting a specific area, organ for a specific purpose. I guess that's the best way that I can describe it. And essentially, when we're working with Kundalini Yoga, we're working, yes, with the physical body, with the organs in the body, because many of the organs in the body hold and store emotions. But we're also working on the auric field, which is our electromagnetic field. And according to Kundalini Yoga, it contains, projects, and interacts with our life force energy. So it's like a shield. It helps with our immunity, protects us from illness, and it shields us from negative energy. So when we're doing Kundalini Yoga, we're essentially working to clear our auric field and keep it nice and pure.
It's so important too, I think, coming from, your Ayurvedic background, the Ayurvedic understanding that is, something we're really taking into consideration with postpartum care, with, all different types of caregiving, is it's that subtle, the air and space elements, the subtle, it's like that needs to be happening first in order for the other layers of healing and impact to be able to be reached. So it seems to me like once we're clearing, the air and the space elements, then we can actually reach into, the, grosser elements, the fire, the water, the earth. And I think that oftentimes, in our very concrete society, those levels of healing are not really paid attention to.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kundalini Yoga and Ayurveda, they actually go very, very well together. But yeah, Kundalini Yoga is more, you're working more on the subtle body. So you're working more with the air and space element. But yeah, like they go so well together. And I think that when you're practicing, Ayurveda and practicing Kundalini Yoga, you're giving your body, your mind, and your spirit the best, optimal chance for purifying itself, detoxing the body, achieving whatever, goal it is that you're hoping to achieve as far as, mind, body, and soul wellness.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, why forgiveness in particular. I think Kundalini Yoga is a tool that can be used for many different focuses. I love how, when you were describing it, it's sort of like very specific attention on a very specific purpose in a very specific place. And I think through what I've been taught, in pranayama and yoga in general is, wherever we put our consciousness, that is where the life force or that is where the prana goes. And so to me, that's, really
Yeah.
aligned with what you're saying. Um, but talk about forgiveness. Why this, practice of the forgiveness kriya?
Yeah. So for well, to start off, when I was in Kundalini Yoga teacher training, forgiveness was the very first module. And there was a specific reason why it was placed in the very beginning of the program. And it's because I like to use the term, and my teacher used the term. I worked with Guru Singh and Brett Larkin. And so I use this term, uh, giving them full credit because I absolutely loved spending time in that teaching program. Um, but they say you forgive the past to give forward to the future. So if we want to move ahead, we need to first forgive the past, because there's this energy, like you mentioned earlier, of guilt or shame, and it's the lowest vibration on the vibrational scale. And if we're holding any of that energy, we're not going to be able to fully move forward into the future. So um, another important piece of Kundalini Yoga, or practicing a Kundalini Kriya, is that we practice it for 40 days minimum. Some Kriyas actually will be practiced for up to 1,000 days. It really depends on, your level of experience with Kundalini Yoga, and your level of motivation and drive. But 40 days is the minimum for a full, I guess you could say, consciousness shift. So you're changing the patterning in your body by practicing the same kriya for 40 days. 40 days, you can really take the time to be with the feelings and to embody it.
Hmm. Can you explain a kriya for those who might not know?
Yeah, so a kriya is exactly what I explained about Kundalini Yoga. It's a set of exercises for a specific amount of time, coupled with breath or movement, uh, in targeting a specific purpose. So that's a
Hmm.
kriya. So a kriya can be, anywhere from 8 minutes long all the way up to an hour and a half.
Beautiful.
Sometimes
Beautiful.
sometimes 2 hours.
So, Stephanie, I know that, in your background, in your practice, in your paths of study, there's so, and I think this is the case for a lot of us as we move into what is our purpose, how are we meant to help people? It's really driven by the experiences that we have in our life. And so, I would love to hear about how these practices, how working through forgiveness and, this work for yourself, how this has changed and what you have felt and discovered through the practice.
Yeah. So for me, starting or discovering Kundalini Yoga was what actually, um, I guess the best way to explain it would be altered the path of my professional life, really. Before finding Kundalini Yoga, I was working in a corporate, career that I was not happy with. And I had just, come off of a maternity leave and was still, I never nourished myself during postpartum like I'm learning to now. And I didn't, really kindle that special time in my life, that transition. So I came out of a corporate career feeling extremely rattled. And I think, moms in general, we tend to hold a lot of feelings and emotions and shame and guilt. And that's what I was doing. Um, and when I found Kundalini Yoga, I started practicing it. It's almost like I literally started feeling the weight shedding off. Not the physical weight at first, but yes, it does very good, good stuff to the physical body after some time with practice. But you could feel the energetic weight just coming off. And for me, it was like a light bulb just kind of turned on. And I knew that this was something that I wanted to continue practicing. And I really wanted to dedicate my time to it. And for me, it's so important to have this conversation with other moms, because we feel as moms that it's like our duty and our obligation to just dedicate our time to raising our children, and we forget about ourselves. It's like we kind of lose ourselves. We lose pieces of ourselves along the way until we don't even know who we are anymore. At least that's where I was.
Mhm.
And so my journey since finding Kundalini Yoga has been like picking all those pieces back up and figuring out who I am, and then going all the way back to my childhood, like my inner child. Now I got to do the inner child healing. So Kundalini Yoga is like that perfect, how do I explain? It's like that perfect, it's like it just brings you go to the mat, and that's your time, that's your space. It's your time to embody whatever it is that you want to dedicate yourself to. That's your time. And that's what Kundalini Yoga is to me. It's that spiritual piece that I was missing in my postpartum years, which, I had 3 children. So that was a lot of time that I spent feeling extremely overwhelmed, exhausted, tired, guilty, and shameful. And honestly, guilt and shame, we say they're feelings. Yes, they are feelings, they are emotions, but we choose them. We hold on to them, and we hold on to them because we want to continue punishing ourselves, because there's a piece inside of us that we're not yet willing to look at. And so practicing Kundalini Yoga consistently will really bring that up so that you can look at it and then release it.
Hmm.
Did that answer your question? Because I kind of went off on a little bit of a
Answered
tangent
so many
there.
amazing questions, Stephanie. But I also feel just, to get in there with you, it kind of comes back to this social problem, this cultural problem we have of leaving new families out to just be out there and figure it out. And this complete disillusionment that we're able to just handle it by ourselves. There's so many instances and this ripple effect of oh, I didn't have help, or I didn't have support, or I didn't have awareness about X, Y, and Z. And
Yeah.
then that kind of tumbles over into, well, now I feel really bad because I, was suffering with X, Y, and Z and not able to give my child or my family or my partner my best. And now I feel bad about that. And then, it kind of just is this pervasive issue in
Yeah.
society. And, it's like when we all collectively put attention, and we, mentioned this before we started recording today, is, this is for the future. We're doing this for future generations, our future selves. So when we actually can be seen, when we actually are given acknowledgement and have that feeling of being held, then everything shifts and we are able to experience ourselves and life and relationship in the ways that we want to.
Yeah.
But, in the meantime, it's like finding those practices that, like you said, you arrive on that mat and that time is for you. It's only for you to put your attention on what is feeling out of balance, what you want to feel differently about, what you want to heal. And
Yeah.
that is something that so many people don't get because we don't have the time, we don't have the awareness, we don't have the support in order to give us that time on the mat or whatever practice it is. But I think that
Yeah.
you know our breath and our awareness and our intention is something that we can have at any moment. And so what's so beautiful to me about practices such as these is it just takes the wanting it and the doing it, to make it happen. We don't need a million extra things. We don't need anything
Right.
expensive. We don't need any, it's
Yeah.
within.
And I think it's very important to if it feels good for you, don't find excuses for it not to happen, because we tend to do that as moms. And I talk about this a lot. I used motherhood as my reason for why I couldn't do so many things. But if it feels good, have those conversations with, any support that you might have, and make it happen. And it doesn't have to be perfect. When I first started doing Kundalini yoga, I had to have nobody in the house. It had to be perfectly silent, and I had to light a candle, and it had to be this and that. And now it's like, I learned that, it just has to be me on the mat. And I've had enough conversations with my family so that they know, hey, it's mom's time. We're not going to go in there right now while she's doing her yoga. Or if they do, they're super respectful. So it's just having those conversations and making it a priority, and not getting, distraught if somebody interrupts you in the middle of a kriya and you have to stop your kriya. It's totally okay. But just having that, cheerleader attitude, that it's, you're doing it for you. And just having that attitude is shifting the energy anyway. So um I made a post yesterday about how when we hold on to these feelings of guilt and shame, not only does the feelings find an organ to stick to inside of our body, it also emits out into the collective field. So over time, if we're holding on to guilt and shame, we're literally hurting ourselves, because we can, without releasing it, eventually develop disease. Um, and we also emit these frequencies out into the collective field. And what happens is these frequencies just, float along in the collective field until it finds a vibrational match. And then that vibrational match, or I call it a weak source, I called it in my post, will absorb that frequency, and they may go out and act out on that frequency. So you may not have been the one that committed, a horrendous act, but that weak source that picked up your feelings of guilt and shame that you emitted might be the one that acts out on that guilt and shame. It manifests as a physical, you know, act of violence or anger or outburst. And so, yes, like you said, like mending the next generation, moving forward into the future, it really does start at the source. So forgiving ourselves first is where we can kind of cut that wave of guilt and shame that's like floating around in the collective field. We can cut it off right at the source when we work with our energy and we work with forgiving ourselves first. Because attempting to forgive others before we've actually forgiven ourselves, which means fully taking responsibility for everything that's happened in our life, being willing to see where we played a role or where we were responsible for that particular incident or happening, being able and willing to look at that is going to shift the energy just from being willing, just the willingness alone. But it really does start with us. And I think that's what the great Gandhi meant when he said, you know, be the change that you want to see in the world.
It's powerful. And no matter what background we come from, no matter, how we want to explain that process, it's a very universal understanding.
Yeah.
What you put out there is real. It affects other people. And so what
Mhm.
I am so inspired by is the ability to know that we have choice and we have autonomy and we have the ability to feel different if we want to. And
Yes.
also that those feelings, that it's energy, it is not actually what we are. It is
Right.
this thing that we are choosing to hold on to, and knowing that we can acknowledge it and feel it and be with it and accept it, and then like graciously let it go. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know that.
And
Yeah.
knowing that it all goes back to love. Like as soon as you've done the work, as soon as you've acknowledged it, it transmutes and it goes back to a source, which is love. And that's where we want everything to go, right? Like that's where we want the world to be, is completely, utterly, madly in love with each other and with, everything on this planet. So it really does start with us and doing the inner work.
Hmm. Talk about what we can expect from the workshop to give you all a clue, and we'll have all the information in the show notes. But August 30th, we're doing this beautiful practice, and tell us what we can expect.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So it's a simple kriya, so perfect for beginners, also perfect for experienced yogis and anyone who's been practicing Kundalini for a while. It's gentle, and because some Kundalini yoga can be very challenging and very triggering. This one's quite gentle, and it's about 45 minutes long, but much of it is spent in meditation. And I'll be guiding everyone through it. We'll be starting off with an energy clearing, super juicy energy clearing. It's going to clear every one of our chakras and get us nice and centered and aligned for the kriya ahead. And then at the end of the kriya, we'll be doing some journaling. So I'll guide us through the journaling, because I think the reflection is the most important piece of any kriya. And then we'll have some time for discussion, some Q&A and some discussion. So it'll be quite fun. I would say if you're planning on coming, block off your calendar for about 2 hours so you can really, soak it in and get the most out of it.
Beautiful. Stephanie, I just love connecting with you and really appreciate the heart and the kindness and the wisdom that you bring to the Center for Sacred Window Studies and all the places that you share your work. You all can find out how to sign up in the show notes. And of course, reach out to us with any questions that you have. You can find Stephanie's information there. And thank you, Stephanie. And thank you to
Thank
all of you who have been
Thanks,
listening.
Christine.
Of course, such a pleasure. And we'll see you all soon.
See you there.